Hey guys, Comic Boom here. I thought I would, I wanted to talk a little bit, have a quick, I want to keep this video under 15 minutes. I just want to, I was reflecting more on some of the controversies that Marvel Comics has had to deal with in the last year, particularly flowing out of Civil War II. And it occurred to me that regardless of, criticisms that you can levy against Marvel in terms of how and why they've ended up in this sort of the PR, arguably the PR disaster or PR success, depending how you want to look at it, that they're currently in. I just found it very interesting that if you look at some of the common themes, frankly, between Civil War II leading into Secret Empire. And one thing in particular that I think it's rather interesting that it's been missed, or at least one of the things that I sort of noticed, is the similarities between the actions of Captain Marvel in Civil War II and Hydra Captain America. And I just want to throw a couple things out there, and they might be somewhat controversial, but then everything with Marvel today is controversial. In particular, the first point being that, Captain Marvel herself, Carol Danvers, a lot of Carol Danvers fans were highly critical of the way that Brian Michael Bendis portrayed and wrote Carol Danvers in Civil War II. Many have accused Carol Danvers in Civil War II, and I among them, being that her actions in Civil War II in sort of arresting people on the basis of a prediction made by Ulysses the Inhuman, that arguably that you certainly have an argument there that goes against the Constitution in the United States, that arguably those are the actions of a fascist, arguably, right? Arresting someone for simply because of a thought crime. So even if Ulysses predicts that you're going to be a criminal in a couple weeks, that you're going to rob a bank in a couple weeks, maybe you thought about robbing that bank, but unless you've actually robbed the bank, you're not actually guilty of the crime. We still live in a democracy, after all, and even in the fictional world of the Marvel Universe, I'm assuming they still have actus reus and mens rea. You got to both have the intention to commit the crime as well as the actus reus, the actual act of doing the crime before you're guilty. And yet, the whole controversy of Civil War II was that Carol Danvers, Captain Marvel, was arresting people simply on the basis that they may have thought about doing it, and because Ulysses had imagined or had a vision that they did something criminal at some point in the future. So there's a certain justification in that regard for saying that Captain Marvel, by going full bore in support of that and arresting and wanting to arrest, going so far as to even arrest Miles Morales, which ultimately led to a confrontation with Iron Man, which ultimately, of course, led to her killing Iron Man, at least in the eyes of the citizens of the Marvel Universe, who don't know that, in fact, Tony Stark wasn't killed, but is actually just in a coma. But nonetheless, the whole story of Civil War II, it never really ended. It just ended with Ulysses sort of becoming a celestial and going off into the multiverse. So the issue was never really dealt with. Carol Danvers has never been redeemed. Her actions, in the eyes of many of her fans, were so much so against her character that she went from being someone that was seen, at least in some eyes, as perhaps being liberal or sort of like an older social justice warrior type, to being very alt-right or almost staunchly conservative in her actions, and militaristic in terms of arresting somebody on a mere suspicion on the basis of a prediction. And it's interesting that Carol Danvers, sort of being accused of being the fastest in Civil War II in some circles, we lead in the next big event is Secret Empire, which has Captain America being really secretly being a Hydra agent after all this time. And it's even more interesting that behind the scenes, Captain America in Civil War II was fermenting the discord between Carol Danvers and Tony Stark and the different sides on that whole Ulysses debate. However, here's the thing. Captain America is clearly a fascist. Captain America now is a Hydra agent in Secret Empire, and he's orchestrated a takeover of the United States and probably moving toward a takeover of the world. But at least Captain America has the excuse that it's Kobik, it's a cosmic cube that rewrote his reality. What's Captain Marvel's excuse? I don't think Captain Marvel has one. Carol Danvers genuinely, legitimately believed that she was doing right by arresting people for having done absolutely nothing wrong. She had no problem arresting them simply on the grounds that they might, at some point in the future, do something wrong. That's what's disturbing about Carol Danvers. See, the thing is, I know that at the end of the day, at the end of Secret Empire, at some point, Captain America is going to be redeemed. Marvel says that they're going to redeem Marvel. Tom Brevoort, Trevor Brevoort, Nick Spencer, Axel Alonso all say that the question we should be asking ourselves at the right now, after only the 0 issue and first issue of Secret Empire and the Free Comic Book Day Secret Empire, the question we should be asking ourselves is, how can Captain America come back from this? How can Captain America redeem himself? How can we redeem Captain America? Because they promise a redemption for him, and that the Captain America we know and love he's going to come back. And I'm looking forward to the resolution of it. I'm looking forward to the answer to that question. And I am asking myself that question. However, Marvel never redeemed Captain Marvel. Marvel never redeemed Carol Danvers. Carol Danvers, in fact, fully embraced her fascist actions in Civil War II. And just like Nick Spencer's trying to create some empathy for Hydra Cap in Secret Empire #1, where Captain America is all angsty and depressed over the fact that he's got to execute his friend Rick Jones for not saying Hail Hydra. Carol Danvers in Civil War II, they showed some scenes with her crying over the death of her lover Rhodey, who was also Tony Stark's best friend. But she still proceeded toward violating the constitutional rights of numerous people and arresting them on the basis of prediction. Her angst, Carol Danvers' angst and depression in Civil War II, never changed her behavior. She continued to completely embrace the whole ideology of, no, let's arrest anybody. Ulysses has a dream. Ulysses says Miles might kill. Let's arrest them. Ulysses says this Miss Green character might be a future terrorist. Let's go arrest her. Let's go do all this. You know, forget about the Constitution. As long as you might do it, as long as you've thought about doing it and you might do it, and this Inhuman says you had a dream, we're gonna go arrest you. The fact that Carol Danvers felt bad about it, that was made clear in Civil War II. She may be anxious about it a little bit, but she still went ahead and did it. And we can't ever forget that at the end of Civil War II, Carol Danvers, knowing that she had the power of the sun, knowing that Tony Stark could not possibly hurt her by firing missiles at her, she knew full well that Tony Stark could not hurt her. She nonetheless used lethal force against Tony Stark. And clearly, in the back of her mind, you have to conclude that she must have thought that she killed him. And it was only by the grace of a Marvel god somewhere that Tony Stark didn't die. He was in a coma. But it wasn't from lack of trying on the part of Carol Danvers. And that's what's so disturbing about the difference. So when Marvel says that they're going to redeem Captain America, well, can we believe them? Because they never redeemed Carol Danvers. We're still waiting for a redemption of Captain Marvel. And she's got a movie coming out. And if they haven't redeemed her yet, why should we believe them when they say that Captain America is going to be redeemed? Or what am I missing? You guys can comment below if you want. Maybe I'm misinterpreting everything. Maybe I'm reading too damn much into the whole Carol Danvers thing. I'm making a big mountain out of a molehill. Marvel wants us to believe that the citizens of their fictional Marvel universe worships and loves Carol Danvers, and that they run around, and that there's fans in the Marvel universe that want selfies taken with Captain Marvel. So think about this for a second. If you're a citizen in the Marvel universe, you just saw in the news that Carol Danvers, Captain Marvel, killed Iron Man. And the first thing you do, you want to get a selfie taken with Captain Marvel. Yay, she killed Iron Man. Does this make any sense? I'm not a huge Marvel zombie, and maybe some of you can correct me, but was Iron Man a villain? Was Iron Man considered a real asshole bad guy in the Marvel universe, so that when Captain Marvel kills him for protecting Spider-Man from being arrested for doing nothing wrong, that suddenly the whole world of the Marvel Universe, the citizens love Captain Marvel? What sense does that make? I'm not really following it. But I will say this. If, in fact, the citizens of the Marvel Universe, in that fictional universe, if they're the type that would suddenly begin to worship and find popular somebody like Captain Marvel who murders another hero in cold blood like that, live on TV, which is what happened in Civil War II, because they don't know that Tony Stark's still alive. But if is it that hard to believe that those citizens would also embrace a Hydra nation? I don't think so. If the United States citizens within the Marvel Universe, in the fictional world of the Marvel Universe, if they're going to embrace the actions of Captain Marvel in killing Iron Man, is it really that much of a stretch to imagine that they would hail Hydra when they find out that Captain America's taken over the United States? That's not much of a stretch. And that's what I find kind of interesting about the whole connection between Civil War II and Secret Empire that I don't think a lot of people have talked about. And what's even more ironic is I would think in many ways Carol Danvers and Steve Rogers have a lot in common, the exception being, of course, that Steve Rogers has an excuse for being a fascist. So what was Carol Danvers' excuse? Again, I ask. I just put that out there. And maybe I'm being harsh on Carol Danvers. But I guess you guys can let me know or just think about that yourself. So it's going to be interesting to see how, moving forward, the Marvel Universe sort of addresses all these elephants in the room. And I think, quite frankly, I don't think that the Marvel Universe, I don't think the powers that be at the Marvel Universe really want to address this, because it's a huge elephant in the room, and they just want to move on, and they want to embrace some hope and some rebirth like they have over at the DC Universe. I think they're opening up a can of worms. Right now, I don't think America or even the world is necessarily ready to talk about, to maybe fight over this in the confines of a fictional universe. I think people just want enjoyment out of their comics. I personally don't mind politics, and I don't mind it being in my comic books. But very clearly, you know, looking at Twitter and looking at so many people are just using comic books as a way to comment on their own personal political views as opposed to actually reading the comic books. Quite frankly, when you look on Twitter, if half the people that were complaining about Carol Danvers or Civil War II and complaining in particular about Secret Empire, if they were actually buying the comic book, the sales would be even more great than they already are. And they were pretty good already with Civil War II and Secret Empire. But it's interesting because what I see Marvel doing is they're going to definitely be moving toward the legacy characters. That's established. They got the Legacy coming out, which is the equivalent of DC's original Rebirth by Jeff Johns. Jason Aaron's going to be writing Legacy, and they definitely want to move past this because they opened up a can of worms, and I honestly believe that Marvel never had an appreciation of just what kind of a corner they wrote themselves into. I really, truly don't. They say they do, but they really don't. Because there's definitely a lot of contradiction here. There's a lot of hypocrisy, and there's a lot of inconsistency. And in particular, there is a huge glaring inconsistency with trying to get us to believe that Carol Danvers would be a popular hero in the Marvel Universe after her actions in Civil War II. That I don't buy for a second, but it's one of those things where we're just going to have to let go. It's a comic book. We got to suspend our disbelief leading into Secret Empire and Captain America, and of course we do know that there's going to be a lot of hell to pay once Carol Danvers faces off at some point against Captain America. It's going to be interesting. It's just something to think about, and if you have any comments, you can comment them down below, and I'm out of here.